Welcome back to the channel, Coin Collectors and Treasure Hunters. Today we are taking a fascinating look at the Lincoln Wheat Penny, a classic American 1-cent coin struck at the Denver Mint and identified by the mint marks beneath the date on the obverse. In this video, we are going to explore the history, design, mint mark, condition, rarity, varieties, errors, grading, and potential value. Coin number 1. This rare 1952 with D wheat penny, with special attention to the claimed market value of $187,000 for a remarkable example described as being in blue condition. Before getting into the exciting possibility of an extraordinary valuation, however, it is important to understand that coin values depend heavily on authentication, grade, color designation, rarity, variety, provenance, and actual auction results. Current published references do not support a normal 1952 D wheat penny being worth $187. 0th PCGS lists an auction record of $3,840 for a 1952 with ND graded MS67 plus red, while NGC identifies the 1952 with D as a plentiful issue in high-grade red condition. The 1952D Lincoln Wheat Penny belongs to one of the most recognizable coin series in American numismatic history. The Lincoln cent was introduced in 1909, and its famous wheat reverse remained in production until 1958. The 1952 with D issue was produced at the Denver Mint, and NGC records a mintage of approximately 130,000 pieces for the year and mint combination. The coin was struck in bronze with a composition of approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, weighs about 3.11 grams, measures approximately 19 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. The obverse and reverse were designed by Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of Abraham Lincoln became one of the longest-running designs in United States coinage. When you hold a 1952 with D wheat penny in your hand, the first thing you should examine is the date. Look carefully at the numbers 1, 9, 5, and 2, and make sure they are genuine and have not been altered. Directly below the date, you should see the small D mint mark, indicating that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. The mint mark is one of the most important identifiers on this particular coin, because the 1952 Lincoln cent was also produced at other United States mints. A genuine 1952 with D should have the appropriate Denver mint mark characteristics, and collectors should be cautious when examining unusual-looking examples that may have been manipulated, altered, or artificially toned. The obverse features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above Lincoln's head is the inscription Liberty, while the date appears on the right side of the portrait and the mint mark appears beneath it. The phrase "In God We Trust" is positioned above Lincoln's head along the upper rim. These design elements may look simple, but for collectors they provide a tremendous amount of information about a coin's condition. Every small mark, scratch, spot, discoloration, and area of wear can influence the grade assigned by a professional grading service. Turn the coin over and you will find the famous wheat reverse. 2 wheat ears frame the central inscriptions, creating the nickname Wheat Penny. In the center are the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum above. This reverse design is especially popular among collectors because it immediately identifies the coin as belonging to the historic 1909-1958 Lincoln Wheat Cent series. For someone discovering an old penny in a collection, coin jar, inherited group, or box of miscellaneous change, the wheat reverse is often the feature that sparks curiosity and leads to further research. Now let's talk about the word blue in the description of this coin. Traditional Lincoln cent grading terminology generally uses color designations such as brown, and red for copper coins rather than blue as a standard color designation. A coin can certainly develop unusual blue, purple, violet, or other toning as a result of environmental exposure, storage conditions, chemical reactions, or other factors, but unusual color does not automatically make a coin rare or valuable. In fact, artificial toning or chemical alteration can sometimes reduce a coin's desirability. Therefore, if you encounter a 1952 with D. Lincoln cent, described as having a blue appearance, the important question is not simply whether it looks unusual. The important questions are whether the color is natural, whether the coin is genuine, whether it has been cleaned or chemically treated, and what professional graders think about its surfaces. This is where the story becomes especially interesting. A dramatic-looking coin can attract attention online, but collectors should never assume that an unusual color automatically translates into a six-figure valuation. Professional grading services evaluate many different characteristics. They consider strike quality, surface preservation, luster, contact marks, wear, coloration, eye appeal, and other factors. If a coin has been cleaned, polished, recolored, or artificially toned, it may receive a details designation instead of a normal numerical grade. That does not mean that the 1952 with D is uninteresting. Quite the opposite. The coin can be an excellent collecting piece, particularly when you begin looking at high grades, red surfaces, varieties, numismatics, and unusual mint errors. NGC's records specifically mention that numerous repunched mint mark varieties have been identified for the 1952 with D cent. Collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents often enjoy searching for these small differences because they can reveal details that are invisible to someone casually examining a penny. Another important factor is condition. A circulated 1952 with D wheat penny can show considerable wear on Lincoln's cheek, jaw, hair, and other high points of the portrait. On the reverse, the wheat ears and lettering can lose detail as the coin circulates. A coin that has spent decades in pockets, cash registers, drawers, or coin jars will naturally accumulate scratches and contact marks. By contrast, an uncirculated example may preserve much sharper detail and original mint luster. This is why coin collectors always emphasize grade. Two coins can have exactly the same date and mint mark, but have dramatically different values because one has been heavily circulated while the other has survived in exceptional condition. Imagine finding two 1952 D wheat pennies. The first has dark brown surfaces, scratches, worn lettering, and flattened wheat details. The second has sharp details, attractive original surfaces, excellent luster, and almost no contact marks. Even though both are technically the same date and mint, collectors may value the second coin much more highly. For a truly exceptional 1952 with D cent, professional certification can become extremely important. A grading company such as PCGS or NGC can authenticate the coin, determine its grade, and document its characteristics. A certified coin gives potential buyers much more confidence than an ungraded coin accompanied only by a seller's description. This is especially important when someone claims an extremely high value. A six-figure claim should always be backed by strong evidence, preferably an established auction record or an independent professional appraisal. Let's talk about the possibility of mint errors. Error coins can sometimes be much more valuable than ordinary examples because they were created through unusual mistakes during the minting process. Examples can include off-center strikes, broad strikes, wrong planchets, clipped planchets, doubled dies, repunched mint marks, and other varieties or striking abnormalities. The 1952 with D series has documented varieties, and auction records show that unusual pieces can attract collector interest. For example, Graysheet's published information includes auction records for unusual 1952 with D pieces, including an off-center example and an unusual planchet error. However, there is a major difference between a genuine mint error and damage that occurred after the coin left the mint. A scratch caused by a machine, chemical discoloration, corrosion, polishing, heat exposure, or intentional alteration is not automatically a valuable mint error. The coin must be carefully examined to determine when and how the unusual feature occurred. This is another reason professional authentication can be valuable when a coin appears extraordinary. One of the most exciting possibilities for collectors is finding a coin with a wrong planchet error. In a wrong planchet error, a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or composition. Such mistakes are extremely unusual and can attract strong collector interest. But again, the coin must be authenticated because a genuine mint error is very different from a coin that has simply been damaged or altered after leaving the mint. The 1952 with D cent also presents an interesting lesson about surface color. Because the coin is primarily copper, its appearance can change significantly over time. Freshly struck copper can display brilliant reddish surfaces, while exposure to oxygen and the environment can gradually turn those surfaces brown. Some coins occupy an intermediate red-brown appearance. Professional grading services may assign color designations to copper cents, and these designations can influence collector demand. A naturally preserved red coin in an exceptionally high grade can be substantially more desirable than an ordinary brown circulated coin. But unusual blue coloration should not be confused with the standard red designation used for copper cents. If you have a 1952 with D penny that appears blue, purple, violet, or rainbow-toned, take a close look at the surfaces. Ask whether the color appears naturally integrated into the original patina or whether it looks like a chemical coating. Examine the coin under good lighting and avoid cleaning it. Never polish an old wheat penny in an attempt to make it brighter. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surfaces and may reduce its collector value. Next coin number 2. This 1944 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark, especially an example described as being in very fine condition and carrying a claimed market value of $213, zeroth. The 1944 Lincoln cent is fascinating because it was produced during the final years of World War II, when the United States Mint was dealing with enormous wartime demands and unusual changes in coin production. That enormous production number is important because it immediately tells us something about rarity. A regular 1944 Lincoln cent without a mint mark is not automatically rare simply because it is more than 80 years old. Millions of examples survived, and circulated examples can still be found by collectors today. PCGS describes circulated 1944 Lincoln cents as abundant, noting that they can still turn up in old rolls and collections. So if you find a regular brown 1944 penny with no mint mark and normal circulation wear, it should not automatically be considered a six-figure coin. But that does not make the coin uninteresting. Far from it. The 1944 Lincoln wheat penny is an important historical artifact from a remarkable period in American history. It was produced when World War II was still raging, and the United States was mobilizing enormous amounts of industrial capacity for the war effort. The coin itself represents the return to the traditional copper-based cent after the unusual steel cents of 1943. That transition created one of the most fascinating stories in Lincoln cent collecting. To understand why the 1944 cent is so interesting, we need to go back to 1943. During World War II, copper was considered strategically important for military production, including ammunition and electrical equipment. In response to the shortage, the United States Mint produced Lincoln cents on zinc-coated steel planchets in 1943. These silver-colored cents were dramatically different from the familiar bronze wheat cents that Americans had used for decades. In 1944, the Mint returned to mostly copper-based planchets, but a small number of leftover 1943 steel blanks accidentally entered production. This created the extremely rare 1944 steel cent. NGC identifies the 1944 steel cent as a transitional error and notes that these pieces are among the highly sought-after rarities in United States numismatics. The normal 1944 Philadelphia cent was made from a copper-based alloy and weighs approximately 3.11 grams. It measures about 19 millimeters in diameter and has a plain edge. PCGS identifies the standard 1944 Philadelphia cent as a 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition. A genuine 1944 steel transitional error, by contrast, is struck on the zinc-coated steel type of planchet associated with the 1943 cent. That difference in composition is one of the most important clues when examining a suspected 1944 steel cent. If you have a 1944 penny without a mint mark, and you are wondering whether it might be a rare steel error, one simple preliminary test is to examine its weight and reaction to a magnet. Steel is magnetic, while the normal bronze composition is not. However, a magnet test by itself is not authentication. It is only an initial screening method. A coin can have unusual characteristics for many reasons, and a suspected 1944 steel cent should be professionally authenticated before anyone makes a major valuation claim. Now let's focus specifically on the very fine condition mentioned in today's topic. In the Sheldon grading system, very fine grades generally indicate that the coin has experienced moderate circulation but still retains substantial design detail. On a Lincoln cent, the highest points of Lincoln's portrait will show noticeable wear, but many of the major features remain clearly visible. On the wheat reverse, the wheat stalks, lettering, and central design should still be reasonably well defined. A very fine 1944 Philadelphia cent is therefore a circulated coin, not a mint state coin. This distinction is extremely important because many online videos and advertisements use phrases such as rare, valuable, or worth thousands without clearly explaining the grade. A coin's date alone does not determine its price. Collectors consider date, mint mark, variety, error status, condition, color, originality, certification, and market demand. This is a great reminder that condition matters, but rarity matters even more. A common coin in exceptional condition can be valuable, while a rare error in a relatively lower grade can be dramatically more valuable. The 1944 steel cent demonstrates this perfectly. The coin's unusual planchet makes it rare before we even begin discussing its grade. The reverse also provides important clues about condition. Look carefully at the wheat stalks. On a heavily circulated coin, the individual lines and wheat details may become soft. On a very fine example, more of those details should remain visible. Examine the lettering as well. Sharp lettering and strong wheat detail can help confirm that the coin has the level of preservation claimed by the seller or collector. Collectors should also be cautious about artificial toning. Old copper coins can develop many different colors over decades because of their storage environment. A strange appearance can be interesting, but it does not necessarily indicate rarity. If someone claims that a blue, purple, green, or unusually colored 1944 cent is worth a fortune simply because of its color, that claim should be independently verified. The historical story behind these coins makes them especially fascinating. In 1943, the mint was experimenting with ways to conserve copper. In 1944, production returned to bronze-based cents, but some leftover steel planchets remained in the mint environment. According to NGC, these leftover planchets likely became lodged in mint totes and later entered production after the mint returned to copper planchets. That accidental transition is the foundation of the 1944 steel cent's rarity. The regular 1944 cent was produced in enormous quantities, but the wrong planchet examples were produced in extremely small numbers. This is a perfect illustration of why collectors study minting processes rather than simply looking at dates. Now imagine finding one of these coins in an old collection. You open a box containing hundreds of wheat cents. Most are brown, circulated, and worth modest amounts. Then you notice one 1944 cent that looks unusually silver. You check the date. It says 1944. You check the mint mark. There is none. You compare the coin with photographs of known steel cents. Suddenly, you realize that this might not be an ordinary penny at all. That is the moment when a collector's excitement can really begin. But the next step should not be rushing to sell it online. The next step should be verification. First, handle the coin carefully by its edges. Do not rub the surfaces. Do not polish it. Do not clean it. Do not apply chemicals. Do not scratch it to determine whether the surface is steel. All of these actions can damage the coin and potentially destroy evidence of its original condition. Second, record its weight using a precise digital scale. A genuine steel planchet will have characteristics different from a standard bronze cent. Third, examine its color and surface under magnification. Fourth, compare it with authenticated examples. And fifth, if the evidence is promising, submit it to a professional grading and authentication service. There are other reasons collectors might become interested in a 1944 no-mint mark cent. Die varieties, unusual doubling, decracks, laminations, and other mint-made characteristics can add interest. But collectors must learn to distinguish actual mint varieties from post-mint damage. A scratch that looks like doubling is not necessarily a doubled die. A damaged mint mark area is not necessarily a rare variety. A discolored surface is not necessarily an error. This is why magnification is useful. A good loupe or microscope can reveal details that are difficult to see with the naked eye. But magnification should be used as a research tool, not as a substitute for professional authentication. The 1944 Lincoln cent also has an interesting connection to wartime metal usage. NGC explains that the mint's copper supply was supplemented with metal recovered from spent shell casings from military training bases in the United States. The popular story that all of these coins were made from shell casings recovered directly from overseas battlefields is much less certain. NGC notes that such reports were likely exaggerated wartime stories. This historical detail makes the 1944 cent more than just an old penny. It represents the relationship between coinage and wartime resource management. The mint had to balance the needs of everyday commerce with the enormous demands of a nation at war. Think about what was happening in 1944. American factories were producing weapons, aircraft, vehicles, ships, ammunition, and countless other materials. Millions of American servicemen were overseas. The United States economy was operating under extraordinary wartime pressure. Yet the mint continued producing billions of coins for everyday transactions. Each 1944 wheat penny is a tiny surviving artifact from that period. When you hold one today, you are holding a piece of that history. Next coin, number 3. This 1958 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark, an important coin because 1958 was the final year of the regular Lincoln wheat reverse design. The particular coin discussed in today's video is described as being in green condition and carrying a claimed market value of $177,000. The first and most important detail is the absence of a mint mark. On the 1958 Lincoln wheat penny, no mint mark indicates that the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. The Philadelphia Mint did not use a mint mark on cents during this era. Denver produced 1958 cents carry a small D beneath the date, while the Philadelphia issue has no letter in that position. PCGS confirms that the regular 1958 no mint mark cent was struck at Philadelphia. This means that when you find a 1958 wheat penny with no mint mark, you are not looking at a missing or damaged mint letter. You are looking at the normal identification characteristic of the Philadelphia issue. The 1958 Philadelphia Lincoln cent is especially interesting because it represents the final regular year of the famous wheat reverse design. The wheat reverse had been introduced with the Lincoln cent in 1909 and remained in production until 1958. In 1959, the reverse was changed to the Lincoln Memorial design. That makes the 1958 penny a historic last-year coin for one of the most popular designs in American numismatics. Collectors who love Lincoln wheat cents naturally pay special attention to 1958 examples because they mark the end of an era. PCGS specifically identifies the 1958 and 1958 with D Lincoln cents as the final regular issue year of Victor David Brenner's Lincoln wheat design. Now let's talk about the description green condition. Green is not a standard numerical grading designation for Lincoln cents. A green-colored surface on an old copper coin can have several possible explanations. It could be environmental toning, residue, corrosion, contamination, or a reaction involving the coin and its storage environment. In some cases, green material on copper can be associated with corrosion products or deposits. In other cases, an unusual green appearance may have been caused by chemicals or improper storage. Therefore, a collector should never assume that green coloration means the coin is rare. In fact, collectors should be extremely careful with green surfaces. If the green color is simply unusual toning, it might be an interesting characteristic. But if the green material represents active corrosion or contamination, it may actually be harmful to the coin. This is another reason why a valuable-looking old cent should never be cleaned casually. Applying chemicals, polishing compounds, or household cleaning products can permanently alter the surfaces and potentially destroy collector value. The standard 1958 Philadelphia cent is a bronze-colored coin made from approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. PCGS lists its weight at approximately 3.11 grams, diameter at 19 millimeters, and edge as plain. These basic specifications are useful when examining a suspected unusual example. A collector can compare the coin's physical characteristics against known specifications to determine whether anything seems unusual. But remember that measurements are only part of the process. A coin can have the correct weight and still have an interesting die variety. A coin can have the correct date and mint identification but still contain a striking error. And a coin can have an unusual color without being rare. That's why experienced collectors consider the entire coin rather than focusing on one feature. Imagine someone receiving a 1,958 penny in change more than 6 decades ago. At the time, there was nothing particularly unusual about it. It was simply 1 cent. People spent these coins at grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, vending machines, and other businesses. Some were placed in jars, some were lost, and some were saved by collectors who recognized that the wheat design was coming to an end. This public interest in the final wheat cents contributed to significant hoarding. PCGS notes that the late 1950 coin roll craze and the public's desire to save the final year of the design resulted in many 1,958 cents being preserved. That means that while the coin is historically important, it is not automatically rare simply because it is the final wheat cent. A true double die is created during the die-making process, before the die strikes coins. It is not the same thing as ordinary machine doubling. This distinction is crucial. Machine doubling can create flat, shelf-like secondary images and is usually far less valuable. A genuine doubled die has specific characteristics that can be studied and compared with known examples. If you have a 1958 no-mint mark penny, carefully examine the lettering and date under magnification. The areas around the date and inscriptions can provide clues. However, do not assume that every apparent doubling is valuable. Many coins show minor forms of doubling that are simply mechanical or post-mint effects. Professional attribution is the safest approach if the doubling looks significant. This brings us back to the word green. If the coin has a green appearance, collectors should first determine whether that color is original, natural, environmental, or the result of chemical alteration. Professional grading companies may reject or details grade coins that have been damaged or artificially altered. The goal is not simply to find a colorful coin. The goal is to determine whether the coin retains authentic, collectible surfaces. Copper is especially sensitive to its environment. Over decades, a copper cent can change color. Exposure to humidity, air, chemicals, containers, paper, plastic, and other materials can influence the appearance of the surface. A coin stored in poor conditions may develop spots or deposits. A coin stored properly can preserve much more attractive original surfaces. This is why storage matters enormously. If you own a 1958 wheat penny that appears unusual, place it in a safe, inert holder designed for coins. Avoid PVC-containing materials, household containers, and loose storage where the coin can rub against other pieces. Keep the coin away from moisture and harsh chemicals. And never try to make the coin look better by cleaning it. A common mistake among inexperienced collectors is taking an old penny and polishing it until it shines. Unfortunately, that can permanently damage the natural surface. A shiny, cleaned coin is not necessarily more valuable than a naturally toned coin. In many cases, collectors strongly prefer original surfaces. Let's talk about grading. A very fine Lincoln cent has experienced noticeable circulation but still retains substantial design detail. Lincoln's portrait should remain clear, although the highest points will show wear. On the reverse, the wheat stalks and lettering should remain identifiable and reasonably strong. A circulated coin with moderate wear can be attractive, but it will generally be valued much lower than a top mint state specimen. This is why collectors should learn the difference between face value, retail value, guide value, and auction value. A coin guide may provide an estimate. A dealer may offer less because the dealer needs room for profit and expenses. An auction may produce a higher result because two determined collectors compete against each other, and a unique error may produce an entirely different price. There is no single universal number that applies to every coin with the same date. Now let's imagine that you discover a 1958 penny with no mint mark in an old family collection. It has a strange green color and appears to have very little wear. What should you do? First, don't clean it. Second, photograph both sides under neutral lighting. Third, weigh it using a precise digital scale. Fourth, inspect it under magnification. Fifth, compare it with authenticated 1958 Philadelphia examples. Sixth, investigate whether the coin may be a known double die variety or another legitimate mint error. And finally, if the evidence suggests something unusual, have the coin professionally authenticated. The final year of the wheat design also makes the 1958 cent historically significant. Think about the transition that occurred in 1959. The United States Mint introduced the Lincoln Memorial Reverse to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. For collectors today, the 1958 cent therefore marks the end of the original wheat reverse era. That makes this coin an excellent addition to a Lincoln cent collection. Even a normal circulated 1958 Philadelphia cent can be used to complete a date and mint collection. Collectors may want examples from Philadelphia and Denver, along with special varieties and errors. One fascinating feature of the 1958 issue is the dramatic difference between Philadelphia and Denver production. Philadelphia struck 252, 525,000 pieces, while Denver struck 853,300. That means the no mint mark Philadelphia issue is actually the lower mintage regular 1958 circulation strike. But lower mintage does not automatically equal extreme rarity. More than 252 million Philadelphia cents were produced, and many survived because collectors saved them as the final wheat issue. That is why the coin can be historically significant without being a six-figure rarity. A great coin story is not necessarily one where every penny is worth a fortune. Sometimes, the most interesting story is discovering why a coin that looks ordinary is historically important. The 1958 Lincoln wheat penny is a perfect example. It is the last regular issue of a beloved design that lasted nearly half a century. It was struck at a time when the United States was entering a new era. It was produced in enormous quantities, yet the finest surviving specimens and significant varieties can still attract strong collector attention. And then there is the double die story. The 1958 double die obverse is one of the recognized varieties associated with this final wheat cent. PCGS specifically catalogs the variety separately from the regular strike. If you are searching through 1958 pennies, this is one of the characteristics worth learning about. Another valuable lesson is that not every error is equally valuable. A major off-center strike, wrong planchet error, dramatic double die, or other significant mint error can attract strong collector demand. A minor die chip, small die crack, or post-mint scratch may have little additional value. The severity and authenticity of the error matter. If your green 1958 cent has a strange raised feature, examine whether it appears to be part of the original strike. A genuine mint-made feature should generally show characteristics consistent with the minting process. A scratch, stain, corrosion spot, or later damage may look unusual, but does not necessarily qualify as a mint error. This is where professional numismatics becomes almost like detective work. You are reconstructing what happened to the coin. Was the feature created before the coin was struck, during striking, or after the coin left the mint? The answer can completely change the coin's classification. So remember this whenever you search through old coins, the date is only the beginning. The mint, variety, grade, color, surface quality, error status, authenticity, and documented sales history all matter. If you enjoyed this detailed look at the 1958 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more American coin discoveries, wheat penny values, Lincoln cent varieties, rare mint errors, historical coins, and collecting tips. Share this video with another coin hunter who enjoys searching old collections, coin jars, inherited albums, and rolls of wheat cents. And remember, the next coin you discover might not be valuable because someone put a huge number in an online headline. It might be valuable because you can prove exactly what makes it special. Keep searching, keep learning, protect your coins, and never clean a potentially valuable old penny. Sometimes a small copper coin can open the door to an enormous story.